is not a country in the Middle East that China is not friends with. Every country, including Iraq. China was the first non-Middle Eastern country to recognize Iraq, 1957. China was one of the first countries outside the Western Hemisphere to recognize Israel. The very same year, China established diplomatic relations with Saudi Arabia. China has very, very few problems diplomatically in the world, except for Taiwan and those few island nations that recognize Taiwan, and they become fewer as we speak. How has China accomplished this? Through economic domination? No, I think through foreign policy, through diplomacy, through a long history of accommodation. And interestingly enough, side note to all this, is that Muslims in China are playing an increasingly important role in this stage of development, in foreign service, in diplomacy, and in business. It's an untold story. I've been trying to write about it. One of my best friends, a man named Yakub Feng, from Xinjiang, he's a Huihui, from Xinjiang Huihui, studied in Malaysia, and now he's the head of the largest privately owned oil trading company in China. Probably didn't know their word. Now, of course, it's always semi-private, but nevertheless, it's a small company in Shenzhen, but he's a Muslim, he's the head, educated in Malaysia. I said, how do you do all that banqueting? How do you drink with all these foreign businessmen, do these contracts? Oh, I tell the manager beforehand, pour water in my baijiu. It's not baijiu, it's water. And then if they make me drink baijiu, I drink it like this, and I throw it over my shoulder. And then I mix their baijiu with brandy and other stuff, and I really get them drunk fast. So you give me all his secrets. Now I think this development strategy in China is important because it makes us remember that not only is China's stage of development very important for the world stage, but also for China's own ideas of itself as competing on a world stage. And so I think there are many, many levels to this theory. But I think, interestingly enough, religion has to be discussed in this. Because the problem for religion is, how does China map the rise? We can probably rise the so-called number of Christians. Now, we don't know how reliable those numbers are, but we can map the estimates of Christians in China with the rise of China's economy. Now, why is that? And interestingly enough, if China's economy falls, and the numbers of Christians keep going up, and I believe it will, how do we explain that as well? You can't relate it directly to economic development if China's economy falls and religion keeps growing. And we can look at Islam. Islamic practice. Muslim numbers haven't grown beyond population because there's very few converts to Islam. I've met very few Hong Chinese, a few. And what happens is through intermarriage, not through religious. But what you can track is how many children then, if they have Han and Hui parents, or Han and Uyghur parents, whatever, they claim all to be Hui, and that hasn't changed. Okay, so when we think about religion, when we think about China's patterns of consumption, how that will change within this new economy, we don't have time to really get into this, the role of the Middle East in this. But I did want to show this Zhenghe map. This was a very important image in the Olympics. I think it's very important because Zhenghe is being held up as a symbol of great Chinese civilization and greatness. What's often forgotten in all this was that he was a Muslim. He did go to the Middle East. This is the ships used by Columbus, the Zhenghe ship, these huge ships, much more developed navy than Columbus, but he didn't colonize. There is this view that he discovered America first. I don't believe that. But that it sort of shows you Chinese nationalism and the using of this guy. But it does show you how integrated Muslims were with China's economy when China was at its greatest peak. And when China has, in the Tang Dynasty, in the Han Dynasty, and then later in this period of the Ming, and the Yuan period, Muslims have always played a very, very important role because they're ethno-religious mediators, that's the term I used in the first book, between the Middle East and China. And they are continuing to play this role today. I don't believe this is true, that he discovered America, but Menzies thinks this. If you're recording this, I won't say anything negative against him, because he's very litigious. He will sue you. And that's why there have been too many things in print against him. But this certainly has had an important role, a sign of complicating U.S.-China relations. It's a trade deficit. We don't have time to talk about it. But again, we see this sort of developmentalist idea that all these other problems, the economy, what if the bunny stumbles, as it has? How will this developmentalist ideology account for this stuff? What will happen to China? One thing that is clear is that the old American hemisphere, the Neo-American empire, is now over. Nobody's talking about that. And they're talking about the post-American world and the rise of the new Asian hemisphere. And guys like Ahmadinejad are getting a lot of press over this idea of the shift into a multipolar world in which China will play a very important part. And clearly President Obama is one who is not pushing the old neo-conservative American empire agenda. Now, Muslims in China have taken the stage on several occasions. They've rarely been at the center of China's staged events, but they played very important roles in history in shaping China. Now, we know these great rebellions that took place in the late Qing dynasty in the 19th century were led by Muslims, particularly in Xinjiang, in Shanxi, and also in Yunnan. Now, they all ended up losing, and millions of Muslims were massacred, but other people were too, who rose up against the Great Qing. My argument is that these holy wars, so-called jihad in China, could not have happened without the Taiping Temple. Without the breaking up of China to the Taipings, these other Muslim rebellions, and these were survival strategies, had nothing to do with Islam, had much more to do with the breakup of China. If China stumbles on the economy, if China went the way of the former Soviet Union, God forbid, I'm not predicting that, I don't hope for it. I think Muslims would suffer, other minorities would suffer, poor people would suffer, the world would suffer if it happened. But should it happen, then I think we might see these other protective strategies. And also the so-called cultural ethnic fault lines, like the former Soviet Union, would emerge. And groups would have transnational connections, like the southern Chinese, the Huaqiao, like the Tibetans, that are government in exile,